somewhat new to Sacred Heart. These are some of our most experienced and wisest singers. And so for those that don't know, this is Hugh McGraw. He was the executive secretary of the Sacred Heart Publishing Company from 1959, 58, 59 until about 3 or 4 years ago. And so I'm still on the board for the publishing company. This is Charlene Wallace. I don't know her. She's also on the board and has been a lifelong singer. Treasurer of the company. Shelbie Sheppard, who's married to Jeff, who's out front. And Jeff and Shelbie and David are the folks who started the SHMHA Sacred Heart Musical Heritage Association that sponsors camp and publishes the minutes every year. And this is Joyce Walton, who's also been singing for a long time. Are you a cradle singer?
No, I started when I was 18.
Okay, so well, what I'm gonna ask everybody to do now is to sort of give a brief, or maybe not all that brief, but a good Sacred Heart biography. How you started singing, what kept you interested in singing, who your singing school teachers were, how you started to learn, and then we'll go from there. So we'll just start. Joyce, we'll just let you start.
What do you want to say?
Just how you started singing, how you got introduced to it, what got you interested and kept you interested.
Well, when I was growing up, I grew up right close to a Baptist church, and they did have some Sacred Heart singing there once or twice. And I can remember going like to the decoration or let's sing out there, and I could hear those people singing. And for 52, a man taught singing school there at the church. My sister, who is 10 years younger than I, she and I went. And the first week we stepped on and got the horse and then over back. And they kept wanting us to come on the, it was all Greek to us. And so finally I ventured up and sit with the ladies that was sitting on the altar. Her name was Ethel Brown. And to make a long story short, I fell in love with Ethel Brown. She was the most wonderful person I had ever met. And that and she would sit there and she would know. And that's how I learned to sing. And I still strive to do that today. And out of that singing school, my sister and I are the only ones that can get to sing. They don't even have singing there anymore, but they are missing a lot. So that's how it is.
What was your relationship with Marcus Cagle? How did you?
Just for
friends. What was your musical relationship?
Well, I met Marcus back many years ago, and after his wife, Lena, died, Marcus would spend time around that land, Florida, back in that area, and he would go to Coleman, where we live up between Fort Payne and Scottsboro near Liberty Church. And he would come by our house and stay a few days. And that's how I got to study music with Marcus Cagle.
Is there anything in particular that you remember from that time and that experience that still kind of shapes how you lead and sing today?
Yes. Marcus was very firm in the way he wanted it done. And he would sit and talk to me and those those words still hang with me today.
Great. Shelby, how did you come to this?
I don't know. I just.
Well, you started, as I recall from before, you started sort of in more of the new book traditions.
I never went to a Sacred Heart singing school until after Jeff and I got married. But I went to, every year, I went to Riverside, and we had 2 weeks of the Do, Re, Mi, Fasola, Ti, Do, and that was real into us. And then I started playing the piano, and that's the way I played the piano, was by the shapes of the notes, not by A, B, C, D, it's by the shapes of the notes. And then after Jeff and I got married, Mr. George Phillips came to taught us school in Oxford, and he stayed with Jeff and me. And we would sit around and sing. And if it was a song that I was having trouble with, he would drill it into, we'd sing it till I got it. So, you know, those. But I've always sung, so I don't know.
What was Riverside? Was that a church or?
Riverside is, you've heard us all announce state lines so many times. Riverside is a church just over the Tallapoosa River in Georgia. In Georgia, and you've heard, all of you, I'm sure have heard of Bill and Regal Glendale. That's where they got acquainted. And a lot of us got acquainted. Jeff and I met at the Sacred Heart thing in Anniston, out towards Jacksonville. And I never will forget the church. It was a cement block with a dirt floor. And so that was in March. And we got married in November. I told somebody earlier today, I said, we eloped, but we didn't because Mother and Daddy was one of them. So we just been singing. And Jeff and I, you know, we were so dirt poor when he and I got married. Entertainment was singing Sacred Heart. And he introduced some part, and I correct him, and I would miss it, he'd correct me, and he used to sing by me, alto, he used to sing alto, and when he'd get one wrong, I'd punch him, and when I'd get one wrong, he'd punch me, so we had a lot of stories. And I've always known Charlene, you know, I can't remember when I didn't know Charlene. It's been a long time. That's about it.
Charlene?
Well, I was raised up for Sacred Heart singing. And we just always went to Holly Springs because that's one of the places we always had to be there. And I went to New Book singing when I was younger. They had a singing school over there not far from my house. And there'd be a group of us that walked up the road to the church. They have church school. But anyway, I got going to Sacred Heart, and let's see, I guess it was Mr. H.N. McGraw from Woodford. I guess he was the one that first went to it. I went to Market Table, and Mr. Phillips, singing school there, and the EI choir, and did I say Marcus? And yeah, and Hugh, and anyway, I tried to learn all of it.
Do you remember how old you were when you went to your first singing school?
No, I just remember going to the time I remember.
Okay.
Going.
A long time.
Because my parents sang, or my grandparents. And I just
So,
that.
and as you were growing up, there was an active singing community at Holly Springs and Mount Zion. And
Well, we had singings all over in Alabama, at all the churches, we have night singings, and, both Bremen there, and we had night singings, singing schools all around it, so.
But you got to remember that when we were growing up, you could stick your head out the window. I lived over in Cleveland County, and you lived over just in Georgia. But you could just say we needed someone to sing, and you didn't have to go out of your community and the church would be full. So that is not true now.
you,
I first started singing when I was 21 years old. I'd go to Holly Springs. My father and mother would carry me in Holly Springs, but I thought it was more important to run around the house, crawl up on the house, and play than it was go in the house and sing. So on the fourth Sunday in July 1952, I went down to Mount Zion for a family reunion. And I walked in the back door, and Lord in mercy, I got converted just walking in the back door. The church was full, and they were singing Alabama 196, and it was after dinner before I went in there. So there was Uncle Bud and Tom and Lee and Buford and all of them McGraw up there singing. And when the singing was over, I went up and asked Uncle Bud, I said, "You reckon I can learn how to do this?" He said, "Yeah, you got just about enough McGraw in you can learn how to do it." So that night I went down to his house and he gave me an old book, didn't have no back, so I rolled it up and stuck it in my back pocket, and I carried it with me in my back pocket everywhere I went for several weeks. And then he had a school down there, and that was in July. They had a singing school in August, and that's when Charlene, I met Charlene, she was at that singing school, learning how to sing too. Of course, she was a whole lot older than me. But
We grew up together, you know. That's
I asked Uncle Tom, I said, "How long does it take you to learn how to do this?" And he says, 4 years. You learn just about all you want to know in 4 years. He says it's just like getting an education. You learn to read and write, and then you go on and further your education by going through school and college. He said the more you practice, the more you'll learn. So I treasured those words that he told me, and Lord, I practiced a day and night for years. Practice.
by yourself at home.
Yeah, I was by myself with a tape recorder. I wore out 2 or 3 tape recorders, and I sang into the tape recorder, and sometimes the tape recorder would get out of tune. But I thought the first time I turned that tape recorder on and recorded something, I thought that the tape recorder was not right, because I didn't realize I sounded like that. But just to practice and patience, I learned how to do it as much as I could.
Some of you may not know that Hugh appeared in Long Ride, wasn't it? It's song over Jesse James, was it?
Well, it wasn't,
His brother.
Anyway, he sung. We tried.
yeah, they called me from California and asked me did I know anybody that could sing a song, a solo in a song about Jesse James' era, and I said, you talking to him. So I went to, that was in 1980. I went to California and they carried me all around. That was a good experience.
And was there, now the song you sang was a social harp song.
Social harp song.
And was there a reason you chose it over a sacred harp song? Or they chose it?
They chose it for on account of the words.
Okay.
To the land was the name of the words. And I still get a royalty check. That's been since 1980, and I still get a royalty check every year. Sometimes it's $25, sometimes it's $15. And I don't get it every week now. But that movie is shown all over, has been shown all over, shown in Japan.
I'd like to hear you sing.
I would too.
Jeff, we were starting off with just everybody kind of giving a short Sacred Heart biography of how you got started singing and who your teachers were and so.
Well, I was two before I could remember. First thing we ever did was go to singing, and that's all we did. You know, I was born in 1930. And I don't know about you people up north, but the Depression wasn't over in the South before World War II started, I can assure you. But we went to singing school. My dad was actually a big friend of Mr. Tom's, Tom Dixon, and of course Sebring too, but especially Tom. And of course he knew Mr. Bud, Uncle Bud, and Mr. Tom McGraw, and all these other folks, and all of them, you know, they were all big buddies back then. And we just knew when Sunday came that we were going to sing. There was no question. If the family went, you went. We didn't have all these options that the young people have now. We went to sing. We went in and we sat down. I can remember twice I slipped out. One time I slipped out and blew all the car horns. I nearly got around before I got caught. But remember Miss Pearl McQuarrie, she reminded me of that. She said, do you remember that? I said, yes, ma'am, I do. But in the earliest singing school I can remember going to was Uncle Tom had one in Ashland. I believe it was in 34 or 35. And I can just remember him from that. I can't tell you anything about what he talked about. I didn't learn anything. I might have got into some more mystery. But we went to singing school. And back then, the young people would go somewhere. We had people up there that year from places like Alex City, Silicaca. I don't know where what's his name up around Jasper, Hugh, that big singing family up there. Kitchen. Lots of them would come down from all over and spend the night with some friends that they had. And so the young people back then went to singing school. Now, if you try to get a bunch of young people to go to singing school now, you can forget it. To go, and go and sit all day for a week like we did. But at that time, I couldn't tell you anything about what we learned. I know what I learned, but you know how that is. But then after that, I used to sit under the old tree out in the yard. In 1930, the last time we moved south was in South Georgia was in 1935. At the end of the year, we moved to South Georgia. My daddy loved to move, I guess. We moved down there, and he was, of course, it was hot down there, you understand, we didn't have any electricity, so we sure didn't have any air conditioning, didn't have any fans. We'd go out and sit under the China red tree, he would, and sing, and I was the youngest when he'd call me and make me sing. So we were down there until he died, roughly in 1942, he died, and we sang with a lot of people. I've sang with so many people, it would be shocking to know how many people I sang with. A lot of you know the Hardys down in South Georgia, of course, the old man from up around Macon that was the, sang with Raymond and them for years. Mostly all those people, and we do them, sang with them. All those people now, there's very few of those people living now that sing. But we sang with all those people, and yeah, the year before I was born, I don't know, my daddy must have been a pretty good salesman. He talked Tom Denson into moving to Fitzgerald, and I'm not sure which year it was. I could probably find it. 1926, 27, 28. We moved down there and stayed 2 years, taught singing schools. They moved him down there in a wagon, I think. They gave him a milk cow, 2 pigs, and a few chickens. And when he moved back, he gave him the milk cow back. And he'd already eaten the pig before. But they all farmed, and so he moved back. And of course, the Depression, and then later we moved to Opelika after he died in 1940, end of 1942. I went to go into singings up there, go to singing schools when I could. Mr. Tommy Shivers had a singing school around. You may not remember him. They were excellent singers. And then after the war came back, after the war was over, they came back. And after World War II, a lot of the young people, your younger people's age, during that time, right after that, we did not have many basses. We did not have many men singing trumpet because they were all in service. So we lost a lot at that time from our singers. And we have really just recovered the last few years, and the last few years to us is 20 or 30 years. So we just recovered from that. Last night, what do we have? 7, 8 men on this thing. Sure. We haven't seen that in years. Occasionally we'll see a large group. But we've been to singing schools to them. Avery taught a few singing schools. I think I went to one where he taught. McGraw. Been around with Hugh, been hanging around with Hugh since 1954, 55, 56, in that area. We've been to a lot of singings together. And back then, we were the young people. In 1955, I was 25. So now you can judge by that what you are now. They look at them now. And they see, I've been living with the same woman all these years.
We're not going to get into that. Well, there's for years that, and I know you won't believe this because now, a singing is just overrun with alto, people that sing alto. And there was for years that Charlene and I, in our area were the only altos.
What, do those women choose
They
gender
were
or
saying-
couple? I mean, is there a preference in terms of women? They would more sing.
We were learning with women the same time. Of course, we still are.
But it was hard to recruit
Alto back when we were, back in the olden days.
Then Joyce.
Then Joyce came along to Bremen, and then her sister sang alto also, and so we recruited some help that way. But it was years, it was lights on alto.
You mentioned that here in Alabama was sort of an awakening for them. Was there a song for the rest of y'all that was sort of an aha moment or something that really got you curious or interested or hooked or whatever word you want to use with that?
I was always hooked.
Joyce, was there a song like that for you?
I can remember many years ago singing Antioch at church. And I can just hear, I want to live a Christian here, I want to die shouting. That was one of them that really stuck with me.
Could any of y'all name a favorite song?
Yeah.
One number one over your
I
list.
think number one on my list is probably 176 on top.
How do you live this?
About some, anybody else?
455.
Shel?
I like to leave 216. And of course, my mother, we talked about speeds this morning and singing Bear Creek. I don't suppose there's many people in here that remember my mother, but man, she really took that song away.
She's been around.
She just moved around. She just let the grass grow under her feet. And Hugh, I can remember us in 1962, Jeff and I were in a car accident, and the first singing that I went to after that was at AI. They don't have that thing anymore. We sat up on stage, and I don't know what we done most was sing or gossip that day, but we had a good time after that. What makes that significant to me was I had, in this car accident, I lost the sight of one eye. And when they called me to leave, I was scared to death. Because I couldn't, number one, I couldn't hold my book, and number two, I couldn't see. And, so that was a memorable time for me.
Charlene, do you have a favorite?
I got several. I don't know
That's me,
Well, you know what you're talking about, the big black book that fell apart. We went to hear that one came out. We had a city school by Uncle Bud McGraw at Riverside here again.
After the 1960 book would come out,
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
the black book came out.
and the book had just fell apart. And before it did that, it just got ink all over your clothes, your hands. You couldn't touch it, I could get black on it. So now you tell us about why I did all that.
Well, Oral Linson was a new book publisher. He lived in Cumberland. He said, I want to do that book for you, and I'll do it cheaper than anybody. He published it. He said, he called me one night while he was in the process of publishing. He said, you know, that book is such a treasure to me that I'm going to put gold paint around the edges, make it favor the Bible. Well, the gold paint was to cover up those 2 or 3 different grades of paper that he used in the book. And we had to go through that book page by page and find out what was all wrong with it. And we found we throwed over 1,500 of them into the Coosa River.
Coosa River. Coosa River.
No, Coosa, that's up close to Rome.
Oh, okay.
And, Oral,
It took a big.
we was singing in Birmingham, just after the book come out, and Oral come in singing over there, Alabama State Convention at the courthouse in Birmingham. And he says, as I was cutting up the walkway this morning, I got 20 feet from that brick courthouse, and I throwed my book just as hard as I could throw it against that book, against that wall, and you know, it's still intact. It didn't hurt it one bit. It never pays to have a business dealing with your kinfolks or your friends. Always go to a business that you ain't got nothing to do with.
So you didn't get your money back.
You get your money back.
Oh, no. And he laid it down on the table in page numbers and went along and sorted it. And you know, if you miss one page, you done got the whole book messed up. But we lived through it. And we are there for 15 or 20 years. We sold, after we got that book straightened out in 1966, we sold 3,000 copies a year. But there for several years.
But, I mean, presumably in 60, y'all were wanting you ready for a new book. What did you do from 1960 to 66? Did you reprint the 36 book again, or what?
No, we sung out that old black book.
You just used it till you got a new
We
one.
used it for
We used a lot of tape.
3 or 4 years. We used it 3 or 4 years.
We don't have paint on our
You
clothes.
said stand up.
Where white, oh, because that book is made up.
You didn't wear your good clothes to the same.
And you can just speak to that book. I want to sing 200, and it just opened up 200.
Several of you mentioned going to singing schools with George Phillips, and one of the questions we had was the story of Phillips farewell. So you can tell that story.
In 1962, Uncle George, every time he'd come down this way to teach singing school or go to singing, he'd come by the house and stay a day or two, and he'd give me those words. One day, he says, if you ever have a chance to put the music to this, I want you to put the music to these words, and it's 4 verses to it, and the words are just wonderful. And George, he always sang tenor, and he had a pencil in his hand. He'd beat time with a pencil in his hand, and he'd they'd call on him lots of times at the start of a singing to offer prayer. And he was a deacon in the Primitive Baptist Church, and he would get carried away sometimes with his praying. Oh, he'd really get feeling the spirit. And Bill Matthews would punch him and say, "That's enough, George." And he'd put it off in.
During this same time that he was coming over to Hugh's, he would come to our house, and he would teach my sister and I music too. And I have got the same copy like Hugh has got. I ran across my copy not too long ago, just the poem.
We had some characters way back yonder. We had this doctor, and And the first recollection I had of him was his name was Dr. Durham. He was the county health doctor. And back then, in our area, they came around once a year and they'd give typhoid and all that kind of good junk, you know. They make your
Treat you
arm-
for life.
Yeah, and then your arm here would fall off. So, but anyway, he told Jeff and me, and Hugh can tell you more than me, that he had some money set aside that he invested actually the depression, and he invested it in an insurance company. And he says, I don't know how much money I've got. And he would come to the sing-ins, and there was nothing wrong with this. He was clean, and his shirt, though, were patched a lot. And he made himself, back then, we didn't have air conditioning and all of that. We didn't have no screens on the windows. And we had a lot of flies to deal with. So Dr. Durham made him a fly swatter, something like this.
Had a short handle.
Sure.
Not real large swipe.
Reach over.
Yeah,
You
and
reach
every now and then, especially when we rest in the song, you could hear Dr. Durham laughing. And then we had this one guy that lived in the Anniston area, that he was always the arranging committee at a singing. And back then, and I guess there's still some folks that are the same way, if they didn't get the lead at a certain time in the day in the singing, they'd get really angry. I mean, real angry. But his name was Leonard Mars. You remember him, don't you? Had bangs. And he would call you, though, to leave, and if you refused, you didn't get called anymore. He didn't beg you. You either got up when he told you to, or you didn't. So, I mean, he ruled the roost. More so than the chairman, don't you think?
Leonard Marsh, he put in that minute for several years. When it was little bitty minute.
Yeah.
Well, let's open it up for folks that have questions.
Hugh, if I can ask you, what was the first song you wrote?
First song I wrote, 500. 500.
And do you remember, like, what inspired you to start writing songs?
Well, I started writing this song and I wrote on it for a year. I changed it. And finally I called Uncle Tom and told him I'd written a song. He said, well, that's good, that's good. What meter are you using? I said, what do you mean, what meter? I said, I hadn't been taught anything about a meter. So he said, that's so many words to a phrase. Common meter and common meter double and short meter. It's so many syllables to a word, to a sentence. And I got to looking and I didn't have it in a regular meter. And I had down in the course, I had it double some of the words. But I got through it and I know what a meter was then.
What's the last song you wrote?
Last song I wrote?
Uh-huh.
Oh my goodness,
One's published.
I don't
Because
remember.
I've heard you say you don't write anymore.
I don't write anymore, but I had a lot of songs that I had started, and I threw them away after the book was published. And I knew they wasn't going to be published again in a long time, so I threw them songs away and quit writing.
That's a shame.
There was, 7 of us on the arranging, on the music committee. Am I right here? So, yeah. I don't think all the time we were working on that for a period of about 5 years, I don't think. 7 years, we never had a crossword.
7 members of the people on the committee. No, we meet pretty often, and we would talk about the songs that we were gonna take out, what we were gonna reword, what we were gonna add to. But, and, if anybody had anything about it, a song, we'd, talk about it, and talk about it, and talk about it. But we didn't have a crossword, or they had to vote on anything we was gonna do.
But
All agreed with.
how did the kind of thought or the idea come about that it was time to do a new revision?
Well, we done, we put an appendix in there in 1960 and then another appendix in 1966. And then we felt like it's been, the book hadn't been revised since 1935, and we felt like it was time to put some new blood in the book, and new words and new authors. We've always had living authors in the book since the book was first published. And those living authors, they're the one that keeps the book alive, because they sing their songs and their friends sing their song. And we put authors from all over the country in there in 91.
What were the mechanics of how the process worked?
Well, they would, when they found out that we were going to revise the book, that everybody would send in songs. And we would go over the songs and sing them, and then we'd sing them at a gathering of singers. And we would record them always and see how they sounded right, if there wasn't any catches to them. And we had a singing, just before the book come out in 91, we had a singing in Birmingham at the Stanford University, and I made a little talk to the audience that was going to, new book was coming out in the next 3 or 4 months, and that we were taking out 46 songs out of the book, and the songs were taken out because they wasn't used often, or we didn't feel like it was taking up space, and we was adding 64. And I said, if anybody here, and there was people there from everywhere that night, and I said, if anybody here got any objection, please express your objections now. Because in 1935, the book was printed, and they left out a song that belonged to a fellow by the name of Zeke Harden out of Cordele. He was a wealthy farmer, and they taken out his pet song, 489. And he told them down there, he said, we'll never use that book as long as I live on account of my song not in it. And we didn't, South Georgia didn't start using the new book until really a long time after that. But nobody in that audience at Birmingham had any objections to any of the songs that we were going to take out.
Here assigned us a section of the book, and if we thought we needed to take something out of the book, out of that section, we had to present it to the music committee.
And we'd talk about it.
And then we'd talk about it, and then we voted. Whoever won, that was it. We didn't argue about it.
How often did the committee meet?
We met
2 or 3 times a year.
2 or 3 times a year when we was doing it.
And you started about 1985?
Yeah.
Started the process about
Started in 85 and the book come out in 91.
Any other questions?
I've got a question about when a song is a new song. and when it stops being a new song, because it's been in the book long enough. One of the first Sacred Harp music I ever heard was a record of the 1959 United Convention. One of the first songs I ever heard was 455. So when I heard that, I thought, this book must have been in it for hundreds of years. When I got a little smarter, I saw that it was putting in 30, 35 or 36. So in 1959, it wasn't that old. And so, someone like you, Jeff, Soar Away, it was not that old when you were coming up. That's a recent song. And then after the 60 book, things like Sermon on the Mount or 542, those were new songs. So I guess I'm wondering, how long does it take until people stop thinking of it as a new song? I mean, now we think, oh, can't have an every book without
I
542.
lived through some of that.
Yeah.
In the 40s, people were still missing songs like 455, not being able to sing them like they should. Now, this is in 1934, 35, actually, when it came out, I think, maybe 36. But they were missing some of the songs at that time they did not sing. I can't think of the numbers, I don't know the names. But there were several songs that we get to the fusion part, and they'd miss it, or they'd miss other places, and we were still missing some of them. And so it takes a while to get accustomed to some of them. I don't know, we didn't really have that much trouble with the new songs in this book. Number one, I think people were a little smarter with their music back then. I don't mean that we were geniuses from the older people, the other generation, but they were a little better educated. Hugh had taught a lot of singing schools. Elmer Kitchens, of course, they had a lot of benefit of a lot of people. So I think we had an advantage over them back there. They didn't have the transportation that we had, and they would have a lot of local groups singing their song, and if they missed it, they'd miss it every time they tried. So I think maybe that caused them to have a little harder time to get to sing the song.
Well, I
It'd
think
be when it wouldn't be a new song, when you get tired of it, singing it, then it wouldn't be a new song.
I think things that was put in there the last time was due to the publicity and the availability of recordings, and that you had a book printed that was just listing new songs, and it was not cumbersome. You could, I'd be driving down the road when I go to take Bud to the doctor, and I'd be singing and holding my book. But the only thing about that and listening to the tape was I learned what I thought was the treble as much as I could see looking at the book. And I got up one day to lead a song, and it just blew my mind. It wasn't the tenor wasn't anything like I thought it was, And so I had gotten the tenor and the treble mixed up. But I think that helped greatly about the new songs and being able to sing.
Well, one of the things that I'm really curious about is how the sound of singing has changed over the decades. This is something you can illuminate a lot of the younger people in the audience on. Do you think it's changed for the better, or has it just changed in some ways that you will dislike? Can you talk about how it's changed over the decades?
I think we sang them a little different than they did 100 years ago. We go a little faster than they did then. And 100 years ago, didn't nobody lead but the men. The ladies did. They wouldn't have. You see, the ladies didn't start keep speaking in public until after the 1900s. The lady was there to get up and say anything at a singing. But and that's changed. But
You didn't say that was better or worse.
it's worse. But the more you sing those songs, the better you'll get at them. And that's one reason that they sound better. We sing them so much.
And if you've seen the Awake My Soul tape, and I'm sure all of you have, Hugh talks about in there Charlene and Carlene and Richard and him going down the road and you sing and you sing and sing and that's another way, you know, you can learn these songs and they just come familiar to you.
Yeah.
But you know, to me, they don't ever get old. It does.
No, you don't get old either.
Last weekend, Michael and I went to singing on Saturday. Well, we met at the same place Sunday morning at 5 o'clock and headed out again. And we started up the road, and Michael looked at me and he said, "We must be crazy." He said, "We just did this yesterday." And I said, "Yeah, we're going back to do the same thing. See, these part of the same people and sing the same song. But it'll be me." He was just as enthusiastic Sunday as it was.
I think a lot of the reason we go to singing like we do is the music, the people, and the fellowship that you have with these people. I don't know, for instance, two of you, how long you've been knowing each other? We've been singing together since,
Way back.
we sang way back in, Charlene and I were just real small young people when I first saw her. And of course, that was in the 50s. I said it was in the 50s, Charlene.
I'm just curious, back to the revision process, how many songs roughly were submitted for the 91 vote? And of those that got in, how much you might have made suggestions to the voters for changes, or if you just took them as is?
Well, we would make changes on people's songs that they sent in. If the chords wasn't just right, or if the progression of tones wasn't just right, we would make some changes. And the fellow from up in up north that wrote 474, Bruce Randall. He did submit a couple of songs in 1985, and since then he's written over 3,600 songs. Yeah. But he didn't submit. But we got one of them that he out of his, well, he might have turned in 2 or 3, but we got one of them.
So were there about 50% of them got in that were submitted? Or
No, I imagine it's more than that got in.
I think there were about 250 submitted.
Oh,
250 submitted.
We recorded about close to 150, didn't we? Don't you remember that, anybody? We had about 100 the first time we recorded.
That's right.
And the music committee used to sing all that we got in, and some of them got culled from that.
There was some Daniels come in. And the thing about it, the one that come in, the person that sent it in, he loved it. That's his favorite song. And we didn't want to hurt his feelings, so we had to very nicely tell him it didn't make the grade.
Hugh wasn't very popular about that. Well, he had to do all that to get it done.
Why did you take out the footnotes under the songs?
Well, when you're singing, you should be watching the music and not reading the footnotes. And we have, since 1991 book come out, Warren Steele has been working on getting out a companion to the Sacred Heart, and he was going to use all those footnotes. And some of the footnotes, like Karn said this morning, John Leland was a centric fella, and that didn't need to be in footnotes. And I used to say, when we added footnotes in 66, we added footnotes, and I asked Aunt Ruthie Denson to write some footnotes with this song, and she says, well, I don't know anything nice to say about that. You didn't know anything nice. But a lot of the footnotes were incorrect, and Warren still is trying to correct them. He's done a good job, and I understand that his book is finished, and it's about ready to go to press.
Bob?
I just have a little story about Bear Creek, since Shelbie mentioned it. The first time I ever went south to sing was in the early 90s. I don't remember what year, but we stayed at Jeff and Shelbie's. In fact, I slept in Jeff and Shelbie's bed. They were sleeping elsewhere. I slept with Judy Hoff's sister, Melanie. There were 5 of us in the bedroom sleeping. And so I went to my first singing down south. I guess it must have been Sand Mountain. And we had been told up north to dress differently when we went down south to sing. None of this jeans and hippy-dippy stuff or whatever. We were in Cincinnati near the university and all this stuff. And John Beal, whom some of you know, had kind of coached us because he was from Alabama, and he said, you know, we'll have to behave a little differently when we go down there. So all of us that went down were dressed in our, you know, Sunday best kind of things, you know, no pants, no nothing, everything. So, and also with Bear Creek, we hadn't dared to sing that up north much because there's an awful lot of notes on that page. And they printed them in this little bitty type, which you knew meant something or other, you know, we weren't quite sure. So we sang at kind of a moderate speed, but not very much at all. So we get down there, and people were singing, and then this lovely lady stood up, a fairly tall, spare lady with short, curly hair, and she led Bear Creek so fast you could hardly read the notes on the page. And it was Leslie Cates, and I didn't make any connection then because I didn't know the name. Well, not only did she read it at a speed that you wouldn't believe given her age, but she was dressed in a cherry red pantsuit. Not just a pantsuit, a sweatsuit. So that broke all of my images of what you should wear to sing down south, and that was Shelbie's mother.
One thing, when Jeff and I lived in Gadsden, we had a 2-story house, and the same bedroom, I could put a king bed and a double bed and 2 single beds in that room. And people called it the dorm. The most we slept at one time was 21 people besides Jeff and me. And they all had
Just lay down.
everybody had a bed but Jeff and me. And so we had this bright idea. Now this is about 2:30 in the morning, and you get everybody quiet, you know, and you think, well, maybe I can go to bed because I got to get up at 5 o'clock and start cooking again. Well, we had this air battery blown up, and we were so tired, and we laid down on that air battery. About 15 to 20 minutes, we found ourselves on the floor. All the air had come out of the battery. And we we had 2 recliners that was right at the back of us. Instead of us getting up and sitting in the recliners, Jeff had this bright idea about going out in the garage and getting a pump to pump the air mattress up. I could just see all of these people coming down to see what we was doing. Pumping that air mattress up. And that's been the funniest thing that we've liked about that all the time. Not having enough sense to upset the chair, just lay there on the floor. Both of them for the Liberty singing, and Jeff wouldn't sing tenor. And I kept wondering why he wasn't singing tenor, he was way off on the bass. They called him the lead, and they had to wake him up. He was up there asleep.
Back years ago, they used to go to singers and they'd camp out all out, the men would all the way around the house, building bonfires. And George M. Maddox, about 2 o'clock in the morning, he decided he wanted to go see Emma. That was his wife's name, Emma. And he went around to her window in the house and knocked on the window and said, Emma? And there's 5 women stuck their heads. So George, he didn't get to see Emma.
I was going to ask about the practice of reading. Do any of you remember the days when it would be one person reading for 20 minutes?
Yes.
When did they stop doing that? Why?
He's older than I am.
Actually, she's older, so I'm gonna put you on. They did that. I remember the old man, the chairman of the Ranger Committee, stood up on he used to have the singing in the courthouse in Ashland, and he would stand up in the judge's area with his stopwatch. And he was one-armed. I can't remember his name. I remembered it for 100 years, but I done forgot it now. And when your time was up, man, you gotta be ready to sit down. They would sing at one time for 20 minutes, and then they cut it back to 15. But some of the old minutes they've got where they sang for 30 minutes, wasn't it? You don't remember that from the minutes? Not an hour, I don't think they ever sang for that.
They would, nobody would lead but the men, and they had to be teachers or delegates sent to that singing by another singing. Another singing would write a letter and introduce this man that he was capable of kids' music and leading his own music. And the chairman would ask the secretary to read the letters that come in for these people. And they would, they would tell stories when they got up some that they wouldn't lead the whole 20 or 30 minutes. They'd say, it's been so hot down in our part of the country, the peas don't grow, and we had to kill some cows because we didn't have water for them. And they'd tell interesting stories about, and then they would sing the song.
When did that start to change?
Well, the ladies didn't start leading until in the 20s. One lady led in 1878 at Mount Zion, S.M. Denson's wife led, and it was so, she was so good, and she would point to the parts and smile at them, and that the congregation stood up in their seats to where they could see it, and there was a reporter there that hung from the rafters and made her picture of singing. But no more ladies led until in the 20s.
I was curious about the 1960, 66, and 71 provision processes, or this supplement processes. How did it work putting those supplements together? What was the process like? Was it different anyway?
The one that printed the book had to put all the parts together and assemble the book. But the 1972 edition was only it was made with a fellow from Atlanta printed it, and it was a whole lot bigger than this book and thicker, and it was made printed in Bremen at Bremen Printing Company, he said he could print that book as good as anybody. But when he sent it to Atlanta, there was a fellow over there by the name of Cable that worked at a printing place, and he put the back on it, but he didn't cut it down in size. And when it come out, the people didn't like it because it was too big. There was a lot of comments, and then we had to go and get another bid to get some more books printed from a different place. And Kingsport Press probably printed our book more than anybody, any other company up from Kingsport, Tennessee. And they printed numbers of years.
What about the selection of the songs?
Well, the selection of the songs was always done by a committee. No one person ever chose certain songs put in there or take out. It's always been a committee.
Okay, we're over right now.
Yeah, okay, I got a question.
From what you said, Sacred Harp's position has gone from being like at one point in certain parts of the South to being one where you would just almost holler out your window, you get enough people to go to the singing, to now where there are like 2 singers left in a county or something. And I wonder if there are any stories or reminiscences about, when either like conflict with people that were like looking down on Sacred Harp as being old-fashioned and out of style, or conflicts with religious leaders that thought that Sacred Harp wasn't doing for them what they wanted to have in their churches.
No, there was no conflict on any of the city of those people. We went to Sacred Harp singers. When I was in school in the early 40s, we went to singings, and then we never told the people we went to school with, the people we worked with, that we went to singing. We just went to singing on the weekend and went home and did our business.
But there was, but I know I encountered it in going to school, they make fun of you, because they say, well, how do you know? Said, it sounds to me like you're singing the same song over and over, and I don't understand.
There's been a lot of criticism like that. People said, don't those old songs once you get tired of them, and they all sound alike. I don't want that in my church, and we had to move to another location.
Well, see, we have that right around where I live. And up there, basically, it's Liberty Church, Antioch Church, and Shady Grove Church, and Macedonia Church that sing Sacred Heart. And everybody else kind of turns their nose up at me and all these other people that get the car on Sunday morning or Saturday morning and drive a couple 100 miles, sit there and sing all day.
And the gas is really hurt us at
Before I was gonna have to get in one car.
Well, we used to always go in a 6-door car.
No air
The cars were
conditioning.
larger
No
though,
air conditioning.
not the SUV, but anyway.
We're over our time a little bit, but first of all, thanks to all of y'all for coming. I want to ask if you will do a favor for me. When we had the 150th Chattahoochee Convention, you told a story at the end of the second day, I believe, about an old man going to singing.
Oh, please, tell us.
And we did. I don't think we got it recorded, and I'm not sure that it got on video. So I'd like to ask you to close this out by telling that story. I think you referred to him as Old Joe or something like that.
I've forgotten.
I remember it.
I know that.
I can't.
Do you remember Richard?
This fellow went to the singing, and he said that he wanted to park close, and then all of the parking places was taken, but he found one little place, and he got it, he went in, and he didn't stay very long, and he went back and got in his car and left, and he said to his wife, when he got home, he says, there wasn't no parking places for that up there, for no body to park comfortably, and they sung the same old songs all the time, and they sang that they had prayer for 2 or 3 times, and was that the one you?
Well, it was that he complained about the whole thing, and the next day he goes to the
barber shop, he said, he asked him what kind of singing they had, he said, it's best not have been.